The DLE-40 that I'm using in this plane hadn't been running quite a while, but it started pretty easily, and we're going to leave it run a little rich for the first few flights anyway. I've always used the best 20B prop on this motor, and that's what we're going to use on it in the Valiant. We lucked out with the weather and have very little, if any, wind for the maiden flights. As always, when a plane breaks free to ground the first time, there's always that little bit of worry about what it's going to do. The first thing that surprised me is how straight the Valiant went when I gave it the power. The first thing we noticed is that the Valiant isn't hurting for power at all. This plane is surprisingly fast if you leave the throttle wide open. I think part of that is because the fuselage is pretty narrow for a plane this size. And right around in here I'm finding out that to get this thing to fly straight and level, it needed about 3 clicks of down elevator and 2 clicks of left aileron. I think we just want to get used to it. A plane this big with this much lift is going to need some trim adjustments every now and then, especially when the weather changes. Something else that I like about the Valiant from the start is how responsive it is to the rudder. I was a little surprised at how well the Valiant tracks once you get it trimmed out. And it doesn't take much motor to keep it flying. It does like a little rudder to keep the tail up when you're going through the turns, especially if you're a little slow. The Valiant likes a good bit of down elevator when you go to full flaps, and since I forgot to program that in, we're going to do the first few touch and goes and landings without any flaps at all, but that proved to be very easy anyway. Here I wanted to try slowing the Valiant into a stall and see what it would do. And as I was expecting, the Valiant didn't do anything weird. When you get it slow enough, the nose drops through and it starts flying almost right away again. It's beginning to look like it's going to be kind of hard to lose control of the Valiant. Something else I wondered about is what the ground handling would be like with the big Dubro 6-inch balloon tires. Between them and the positive steering tail wheel, ground handling is just fine with the Valiant. You do want to remember that if you're holding a bunch of elevator, this thing will start flying at a good fast walk. Go to full flaps and the Valiant is very stable at lower speeds. With all of the recommended throws in here yet, you're not going to over-control the Valiant. And as you can see here, the roll rate isn't anything to write home about. That's full ailerons. One thing that's taken a little getting used to with the Valiant is that the 108-inch wing doesn't fit through just any old opening. That might be one reason they put fiberglass tips on these wings before they cover them. If you're not paying attention, there will be some contact. Even at the docile control throws recommended in the manual, the Valiant is capable of some aerobatics. This will be a good plane for people to learn the basic aerobatics also, because it's very stable throughout the maneuvers. The reduced speed also gives a newer pilot time to think about what they're doing. Pull the flaps up and give the Valiant some power, and this thing moves right along. The Valiant is rather aerodynamic, and that gives it a lot of speed. It's certainly more speed than I would have expected out of a plane this big. And the Valiant is very power happy even with this plane 35 motor in it. Then as soon as you're done with the aerobatics, pull the power back and drop the flaps and the Valiant slows to a walk. And it remains very stable at those lower speeds. And you'll find out that the flaps aren't just for landing, because you can slow this plane down quite a bit and do low-level stuff. The rudder on the Valiant is very friendly and has no bad habits. This is a great plane to use the rudder along with everything else to make tighter, smoother turns. If the Valiant has a downside, it's that it's capable of flying so slow. All the controls remain responsive and feel really good, right up until you get down to where the plane just won't fly anymore and it tries to fall out of the sky. The good news here is that speed is very low, and by the time you get going that slow, you ought to be thinking that something's about to happen here. Usually all it needs is just a little shot of power, bring the RPM up a little bit, and the Valiant flies fine. Because the Valiant will fly so slow, we were able to get some chase footage from an FPV helicopter. It wasn't helping anything that Mike, who's flying the FPV helicopter, had no idea where I was going, so he's just trying to stay behind me. But this is an interesting point of view, and I think we'll try and use some footage like this in the future with our reviews on airplanes. So if you're looking to get into giant scale and want an easy-to-fly airplane that has lots of aerobatic capabilities, you need to look at the Valiant. Hangar 9 gave this plane all the stability we need with a lot of speed and capabilities that'll make it more fun to fly later. Some of the biggest problems I had with the Valiant is that it just didn't want to stop flying. And to be honest, I generally don't want to stop flying the Valiant either, because it's a lot of fun. I like blowing holes in the sky with my fast planes just as much as anybody, but the Valiant is just a lot of fun to fly. Now that we have the Maiden flights out of the way and the Valiant's flying nice and straight and true, we're going to start increasing the control throws and see how lively we can actually make this plane and still have it enjoyable to fly.